When it comes to archaeology, things are not always what they first appear to be. Experts and scientists may believe they understand what they've uncovered the moment a new discovery is made, but the deeper they examine it, the more weirder it becomes. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at some impossible ancient finds that ultimately left archaeologists in shock. Number 15. The Sonali Chariot. Warrior burials always carry a certain weight, but the one discovered at Sonali in India back in 2018 came with an extra layer of shock because it wasn't supposed to be there at all. Archaeologists excavating the site uncovered a Bronze Age burial complex containing chariots, coffins, swords, daggers, and ornaments, all arranged with the kind of intention that makes it instantly clear this was no ordinary grave. The centerpiece was a remarkably preserved chariot, dated to around 4,000 years ago, making it one of the most important finds of its kind on the Indian subcontinent. The vehicle itself is compact, clearly designed for a single occupant, and decorated with copper-covered wheels marked by geometric and solar-like symbols. It looks ceremonial, military, and deeply symbolic all at once. That's what makes the burial so gripping. It hints at an elite warrior culture with ritual practices and technologies more complex than many people had assumed for that place and period. Whether this individual was a ruler, fighter, or something in between, one thing is obvious. They were not buried like someone history meant to forget. Number 14. The Disbelief Tablet. Well, the Disbelief Tablet is one of those artifacts that doesn't just raise questions, it raises its eyebrows at half the timeline of civilization. Discovered near Lake Castoria in northern Greece in 1993, the object is a small wooden tablet etched with a series of strange symbols that may represent a very early form of writing. That claim alone is enough to shock historians, because if the dating is correct, the tablet is around 7,250 years old. I mean, that would place it older than the traditional rise of writing in Mesopotamia, which is the sort of thing people don't usually surrender without a fight. The real problem is that nobody on Earth can read it. There's nothing else quite like it to compare against, so whatever message it once carried, whether profound, practical, or embarrassingly mundane, has remained sealed behind silence. It might hold an early record of communication, ownership, ritual, or trade, or it could be something much simpler. But until more examples turn up, the tablet sits there like a smirk from the prehistoric world. Number 13. The monkey-shaped Mayan skull. There's something wonderfully creepy about an artifact that looks playful and unsettling at the same time. And this monkey-shaped skull from the ancient Mayan city of Palenque is one of them. At first sight, it almost looks like some kind of grotesque ceremonial skull, but it isn't real bone at all. It's a carefully carved piece of limestone discovered inside a 3rd century tomb and now treated as one of those objects that raises more questions than it answers. Archaeologists believe it may represent a form of protective headgear worn during the brutal Mayan ball game, a sport played with heavy rubber balls on narrow stone courts and often tied to ritual, status, and sacrifice. That's the detail that gives the piece its edge. It may look odd to modern eyes, but to the people who buried it, it likely symbolized prestige, protection, or even honor in the afterlife. In other words, what looks creepy to us may once have been a sign of deep respect. Number 12. The Street House Farm. Salt production site. Salt sounds boring until you remember that entire economies were once built around it. That's what makes the discovery at Street House Farm in North Yorkshire so much more important than it first appears. Archaeologists working at the site identified evidence of a Neolithic salt production facility that may be around 6,000 years old, and which would make it not only older than Stonehenge, but also potentially one of the earliest known examples of salt processing in Europe. That matters because salt wasn't just a seasoning. It was survival. It preserved food, changed diets, and supported more settled ways of living. At the site, Researchers found broken pottery, salt-rich ditches, storage pits, and hearths, all pointing toward organized production rather than casual use. And that creates a problem for older assumptions about prehistoric Britain. If people here were processing salt at this scale so early, then they may have been far more settled, specialized, and economically capable than the usual hunter-gatherer stereotype allows. Number 11. The Arad Ostraka. Well, not every discovery that changes history comes wrapped in gold or buried in a royal tomb. Sometimes it's just broken pottery with handwriting on it. That's what makes the Arad Ostraka so good. Found at the ancient desert fortress of Tel Arad in Israel, these pottery fragments became especially important after renewed study in 2020. On the surface, many of them look unimpressive. Mundane notes, military instructions, supply records, little scraps of everyday life. But once scholars examined the writing more closely, the bigger implications started creeping in. A surprising number of different people appear to have written on them. That suggests literacy in Judah around 2,600 years ago may have been much more widespread than historians once assumed. And if ordinary officials or soldiers were casually writing things down, then the infrastructure for recording, copying, and preserving important texts likely existed too. That matters because some of the inscriptions connect to the broader world of the Old Testament, which means biblical material may not have lived only in the hands of elite scribes. Number 10. The Monastery of Deer Gaming Board. Few things frustrate archaeologists more than knowing a place existed and still not being able to pin down exactly where it stood. That's been the headache surrounding the lost Monastery of Deer in Aberdeenshire, a site scholars have hunted for years because of its connection to the Book of Deer, the oldest surviving Scottish manuscript. Then, in 2018, a discovery nudged the search in a much more promising direction. Buried in the area was a disc-shaped medieval gaming board, small enough to miss if you weren't paying attention, but old enough to matter in a big way. And the carved board dates back to roughly the 7th century, which is crucial because earlier excavations nearby had failed to turn up anything older than the 13th century, far too late to support the monastery's timeline. The board itself may not have belonged to monks at all. It could have passed through many hands. But it proves something far more useful than ownership. People were here centuries earlier than the physical record had previously shown. Number 9. The Coles Hill Gatehouse. Sometimes history doesn't get rewritten by kings and queens. Sometimes it gets rewritten because someone building a railway accidentally finds a wall full of bullet scars. That's more or less what happened in Coles Hill, where archaeologists surveying land for Britain's HS2 railway project uncovered the remains of a substantial medieval gatehouse in 2023. On its own, that would have been a solid discovery. But the real intrigue was written directly into the surviving sandstone walls, which were pitted with marks believed to have been made by muskets and pistol fire. Historians now suspect the structure may have come under attack in August 1642, as parliamentarian forces moved toward the Battle of Curdsworth Bridge during the opening phase of the English Civil War. If that interpretation holds, then this gatehouse may preserve evidence of a conflict that predates what's usually considered the first major clash of the war. That would shift the opening edge of one of Britain's defining internal conflicts. It's pretty incredible, isn't it? Number 8. The Nunalak artifact's climate change is doing many bad things, but sometimes it accidentally hands archaeology a rescue mission. And that's what happened at Nunalak in Alaska, where melting permafrost began exposing an extraordinary cache of ancient artifacts that would likely have rotted away if nobody had acted quickly. Between 2010 and 2017, archaeologists, including a team from the University of Aberdeen, recovered around 50,000 frozen objects from the site. That number alone is absurd. But what really gives the discovery its power is the kind of things they found. Wooden masks, carved figurines, tools, ivory objects, and everyday belongings tied to the lives of the indigenous Yupik people. Organic materials like wood rarely survive this well, which means Nunalak offers something precious that archaeology often loses: texture. Not just dates and bones, but personality. The objects feel lived with, handled, used. Some are practical, some ceremonial, and some beautifully strange. Together, they don't just tell us that people lived there. They tell us how they thought, made, decorated, and remembered. All right, now, let's move to number 7, the Tampa Ling human fossils. The cave in Laos did not look like the sort of place that should complicate human evolution, but it did. Buried inside Tampa Ling, high in the Annamite Mountains, archaeologists uncovered a skull fragment and jawbone that pushed early human history in Asia into much rougher territory. The remains were dated to roughly 63,000 years ago, which already makes them important. But the real interest is in how strange they are. The jawbone carries a mix of features that don't sit comfortably together. It has a chin, something we strongly associate with modern humans, but it also shows thicker, more rugged traits that feel much older and more archaic. That leaves researchers in an uncomfortable spot. Were these bones from early Homo sapiens? A hybrid population? Some branch of humanity we still haven't properly named? Whatever the answer is, one thing is obvious. The movement of humans through Asia was not a neat, single-file migration. It was messier, older, and far more tangled than the tidy version most people grew up hearing. Number 6. The Viking gold men of Sweden. Some treasures look valuable. Others look like they're trying to tell you something and just aren't in the mood to explain it. That's the feeling around the so-called Viking gold men, a collection of extraordinary artifacts unearthed in Sweden in 2013. The hoard included all the usual things you'd hope for: coins, jewelry, trinkets, and other high-status items. But the real stars were the tiny gold figurines, each one carrying a strange amount of personality for something so small. Archaeologists were immediately drawn to them, not just because of their craftsmanship, but because they seem to hint at social or symbolic meanings we still don't fully understand. Alongside them were several bronze cast heads, 4 of them realistic and one so oddly shaped it almost looks as if a child made it, which frankly only makes the whole discovery more interesting. These pieces come from a brutal and unstable period in Iron Age Europe, when survival, status, and identity were tightly knotted together. Whether they were hidden for safekeeping or abandoned in chaos, they clearly mattered to somebody, and they still do. At number 5, turtle shell musical instruments. Ancient people had a much better instinct for using every part of an animal than most modern societies ever did. If they ate something, chances are they found a second life for what was left behind. That seems to have been the case with turtle shells, which were used by several Native American cultures not as waste, but as musical instruments. Archaeologists have uncovered carved and pierced turtle shells, particularly across the southeastern United States, with many examples found near Tennessee, and the evidence strongly suggests they were turned into rattles or percussion tools. It's one of those details that opens a door into daily ceremonial life. These weren't just practical objects, they may also have carried symbolic meaning. Especially in traditions where the world itself was believed to rest on the back of a turtle. That idea alone gives the instruments a completely different weight. So people, what do you think about it? Number 4. Saruk al-Hadid. This one feels almost ridiculous when you first hear how it started. A ruler flying over the desert notices a patch of dark stones below, thinks it looks odd, and suddenly archaeologists are standing in the middle of a lost industrial world. That's basically how Saruk al-Hadid entered the modern story. In 2002, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum spotted the site from the air in the Dubai desert, and what looked like nothing much at first turned out to be an enormous Iron Age settlement. Not a campsite or a lonely outpost, a serious place. Excavations eventually uncovered tens of thousands of artifacts, weapons, tools, jewelry, ceramics, slag from metalworking, and repeated snake imagery carved or worked into objects across the site. That detail alone makes the whole place feel stranger, as if the people there were building not just an economy, but a symbolic world around them too. The desert now makes it look empty and forgotten, but clearly it wasn't. Once, this was a place where people smelted metal, traded skills, and left behind enough evidence to quietly wreck the idea that this region was ever culturally thin. Number 3. The Alfred and Colewolf Viking Coin Hoard. It's always funny how a few old coins can humiliate centuries of confident storytelling. That's basically what happened with the Alfred and Colewolf coin hoard, which forced historians to take a second look at one of early English history's most convenient assumptions. For years, the Colewolf II of Mercia has often been treated like a weak, forgettable ruler, who was little more than a footnote next to Alfred the Great. But buried silver has a nasty habit of ruining lazy reputations. Several coins from this Viking-era hoard show Alfred and Colewolf standing side by side, and that image changes the mood immediately. Kings are not usually paired like that by accident. The strongest reading is that the two were not rivals in the way later narratives like to imagine, but rather political allies, possibly working together during the chaos of the Viking invasions in the 870s. If that's true, then the formation of early England was less about one heroic king standing alone and more about uneasy cooperation in a much messier world. Or number 2, the cockatoo in Frederick II's manuscript. A bird sketch should not be capable of rewriting medieval trade history, but apparently no one told the cockatoo that. Hidden inside a 13th century manuscript on falconry linked to Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II is a painted image of a white cockatoo that absolutely should not have been there if the old assumptions were correct. This was not some vague fantasy bird either. Experts believe it was likely a Triton cockatoo, a species native to New Guinea and nearby parts of northern Australasia. So now the obvious question arrives with all the subtlety of a brick. How did a bird from that far away end up illustrated in medieval Sicily? The answer, if there is one, points to trade routes far more ambitious and alive than the usual simplified maps suggest. And the manuscript even notes that the bird was a gift from a sultan of the Ayyubid dynasty, which means that somewhere between island forests and imperial courts, this bird crossed an enormous amount of sea, power, and human obsession. And it's simply amazing. Number 1. The Anglo-Saxon cemetery treasure housing developments have a habit of bulldozing history unless archaeologists get there first. And in Northamptonshire, they arrived just in time. In 2021, excavations ahead of a planned construction project uncovered one of the richest Anglo-Saxon cemetery sites found in recent years, and the scale of it was enough to make even seasoned experts stop and stare. More than 150 sets of human remains were recovered, along with over 3,000 grave goods buried beside them. Some of the finds were delicate and decorative: brooches, beads, clasps, rings, while others were far more direct in their intentions. The dead here were not all laid to rest gently. Some went into the ground with swords, shields, and knives, which tells you something immediately about the people being buried and the world they lived in. What makes the site even more unusual is that the settlement and cemetery appear to have existed side by side, which wasn't always common in Anglo-Saxon Britain. If you've found this video interesting, be sure to like it, share it, and subscribe. Thanks for staying with us, and we'll see you soon.